So before we begin, the full name of this trick is a 1.5 kickback, but we're just going to simplify. Just say kickback for ease of communication. Everyone knows what we're talking about, hopefully. Now, oddly, this trick kind of stands on its own. That's why I've lumped it into the oddities category. There's not really anything that feeds into this. There's no prerequisites. There's nothing you need to know first. Just be a competent skateboarder and you can probably have a go at this one. This is another one of those freestyle tricks where it really doesn't matter which way around you do this. I'm regular and I'm going to be setting up like that. So I've got my front foot covering the back bolts on the front truck, and my back foot's pretty much exactly central along the heel side edge. I've got the ball of my foot just overhanging, so it's just the toes that are on the board. If you want to do this the other way around, whether you're regular or goofy, that's fine. This feels really alien to me, but that might be natural for you. It really doesn't matter. From this angle, you can see I wasn't exaggerating. The balls of my back foot are overhanging the rail of the deck, and it's only the toes that are on the grip ready for the flip. However, we can also now see that this foot is positioned in a very specific way. I've got the ball of the foot this side of the truck on the toe side edge, with the heel just slightly overhanging the heel side edge. This gives me good front to back control, so I can preload the board and counteract the pressure that the back foot is putting in. This is crucial for a reason we'll get into in a second. I just want to talk about the setup a little bit before we get into the mechanics of the trick. As I've said many a time in many a trick tip, my board is completely flat, and in 99.999% of tricks, that works. That's a good thing. For kickbacks, not so much. Like, I've done so many different types of trick on this board. This is the one thing I've found where having a bit of concave actually would help. And that's because as you do the actual kickback motion, having an upturned lip here gives your foot something to snag on, and you get a bit more lift and a bit more flip. It's not essential, as we're about to see, but if you really want to get into kickbacks, maybe you should have a look at a board with a little bit of concave just to take advantage of that mechanism. The other part of my setup, which is not really ideal for kickbacks, is actually my trucks. Not the film trucks. These are fantastic trucks and I love them. It's the fact that I keep them like this. I like a truck that will turn because I like to carve. And this is great for rolling lines, but it's not so great for something that involves side-to-side pressure. Again, if you want to get into kickbacks, the classic freestyle standard rock solid truck, that's really going to help you. If you like to turn, don't worry, we've got a solution for that. Right, so I've bored you to death with information about board setups. Now it's time we can actually look at the mechanism of the trick, the mechanics, what makes it work, what we're doing. The thing is, it's actually quite simple, on paper at least. This is something you can practice without even being on the board, which is not something I advocate often. But all you're really doing, with that back foot in position, ready for the flip, we push down on the edge, the board lands on top of the foot. And then we've got to kick up and slightly forward to kick it back, hence the name. And it really is that simple, down and then up and forwards. The problem is what is a very simple idea is actually really fiddly and really annoying. And there's a bunch of ways this can go wrong. So let's go through them one at a time. The first problem you're going to come across is when you find yourself doing this. Ooh, that's not fun. But it's quite a common thing. You start this trick and you've stood on the ground and you've gone bang, bang, okay, right. And then you try to translate that to standing on the board and you end up just powering straight down. Why am I trying to demonstrate this so viciously? My God. Now, what's happening there is I'm pushing down so hard through the board that I've got no time and no chance to kick it the other way. And like I said, we are doing this, but when you're standing on it, you really only want to get to this point. You get just past rail, literally to there, and that's the point you kick up and through. If you go any further, you're not going to have time. You're just going to hit the floor and keep having a board hit you in the foot, the shin, whatever. Be more delicate with your starting flip. The rest will be easier. Ow. The second problem you might run across is actually in part caused by the solution to problem 1. But if you're lucky enough, you might skip straight ahead to this because kickbacks are great. Now, there's two kind of variations on the same theme here. The first one is this, where you just end up kicking into the void, completely missing the board altogether. And the second one is this, where you connect with it, but nothing really happens. Now, the reason for this, I mean, there's 2 or 3 different reasons you could run into this problem, but they're all related, hence why I've grouped them together. The first one is, rather than drill the board into your shins over and over again, you've gone, right, well, I better overcompensate for that. So you're barely pressing down at all. The board isn't coming up fast enough, it's not coming up far enough, so you've got no chance to kick through it. There's nowhere for you to kick the board into a flip. Now, the second one is when you go, right, well, I've got to kick down enough, but I've got to be quick with the second part, so that's the same thing. You're not letting the board come round far enough. It would if you'd waited a bit longer, but you've preempted it and just gone, whoa, no. There's no solution to that other than practice, unfortunately. Getting the amount of power right, getting the timing right, that takes time. But the third problem, going back to the setup again. This is why it's harder on a flat board. Kickbacks on this are very, very picky. You have to connect with them cleanly and properly. Whereas with a concave board, you've got a bit more room for error. Because if you've not come round far enough, if the board hasn't come past vertical, there's still that little lip at the edge that you can slide through and snag your foot on. No such luck on a flat board. You've got to get it right or it ain't going to work at all. Good times. If you're really unlucky, you run into problem 3, which is actually even more frustrating than the previous one, because you connect with it fine, the flip happens, but you end up doing something along these lines. Now, I've heavily exaggerated, but the point I'm trying to make is the board ends up going that way. Now, there are 2 causes for that. Number 1 is you physically bump, kicking it away like a football. Does happen. Really, all you want is kind of upwards, a little bit forward. Even that's too far. But that drift is caused by the second cause of this, which is you not keeping your weight over it. I've said it before in a trick tip. I'll say it in many more, I'm sure. Your body is a lever. This is the fulcrum. Whatever's happening here is mirrored down there. So if I'm leaning back, when I go to flip, hey look, board's gone away. Now the solution for that, because you only have to be leaning back a little bit for this to happen, is actually to put your arms out in front of you. It's such a silly thing and it makes you feel like an idiot, but that'll help keep your weight centered and it'll keep the board under you. Now I've got to do a new take because I've thrown that completely away, but I'll show you in a second. So here we go, we're in position, we get set up, ready to do the flip, but we're going to put our arms out just to keep us planted. Look at that, stayed perfectly central. I've barely even deviated from this line. It works. It looks dumb, but it works. The next problem only really happens when you start doing these rolling. And that's when this happens. Oh dear. Now, I'm exaggerating slightly, but only because I have to fit in the frame. This is a very real problem. Because of the unusual foot positioning for this and the fact you are pressing down on the heel side edge, you are going to keep turning to the heel side all the time, unless you know the fix, which hopefully would be obvious, but I'm going to point it out just to make sure. Don't tell me you didn't see this coming. It's the front foot, isn't it? If I'm pressing down on the heel side edge with the back foot, I've got to make sure I'm pressing into the toe side edge with the front foot to counterbalance. Otherwise, I am just going to keep turning to the heel side, and no one wants that. Your next and hopefully final major problem, again, will probably only turn up if you start doing that rolling. And it's when this happens. Now, I'm very much exaggerating because I know how to do 180 kickbacks, but that drift, the accidental spin, happens all the time. Now, if you're flipping with your back foot like me, it will go front side. If you're flipping with your front foot, it will go back side. But it's the same problem. Now, the first cause of it is quite easy to diagnose, and that's when your back foot isn't central enough. That's how I learned to do the 180 one. Rather than set up here, I was setting up back there, and all of a sudden, hey, 180 kickbacks are easy now. So if you are getting that drift, that's the first thing to check. Make sure you're flipping centrally. But if you know that you're central and you're still getting that drift, there's a chance, and I don't know why people do this, but it seems to be common. You're kicking in the direction of travel, effectively. Maybe it's a momentum thing, I don't know. But you think you're kicking bang straight. What's actually happening is you're going dirt, dirt. Oh look, 180s. So compensate, overcorrect. If you're still getting that drift and you know you're central, rather than think about kicking that way, think about kicking that way, in the opposite direction. It'll feel really weird if you're not rolling, but when you are rolling, it just seems to tidy everything up. I'm probably not even kicking that far out, but telling myself to do that keeps it straight. It's like magic. Before this video ends, I want to be completely honest with you. Most of the tricks that I've done tips and guides for, I've done because I love the trick. I enjoy doing it and I want to spread that joy and love to the world. The kickback is not one of those tricks. I don't do the kickback. I had to relearn it for this because I've not done one for years. I was very out of practice. And I stopped doing them because they're not for me, they're not my trick. The fact you've got to stand perfectly side on doesn't really mesh with my natural body posture, the way I skate, my other tricks. They don't suit my setup. They are not my trick. But I think they're very cool. Like, they're a satisfying trick to do when I do them, but I think they just look amazing. Like, watching someone doing them in a rolling line at speed is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Seriously, watch Tommy Harwood's one in the Casper video. It is horrible, blurry, low-res VHS quality, but it is stunning. So I just want to see more people doing kickbacks for that reason alone. So go out there, give it a go, get them down, and do them in rolling lines and spread them around the world because they are such a good-looking trick. There is one last problem with it, though, that I haven't mentioned up to this point. And that's, they ruin your shoes. There's a reason I'm wearing these god-awful Strayers. I think that's how you pronounce them. Honestly, some of the worst shoes I've ever worn. They are terrible, but the rubber toe cap, it's good kickback protection. It's literally the only good part of this whole shoe. But if you're gonna do a lot of kickbacks, you might wanna, invest in something similar. Not for me though.